In this video, I'm going to show you how to add Jetpack Compose UIs to an existing Android view hierarchy. You can use these instructions to upgrade an existing Android view application to Jetpack Compose. Note that for migrating to Jetpack Compose, you have two options. First is the top-down approach, in which you select one whole screen, for example this screen, which is currently all view based, and you can design everything in this screen using Jetpack Compose UI. Or you can use the bottom-up approach, in which you can perform the upgrade gradually by designing smaller parts of that screen one at a time and perform this upgrade gradually. This is called the bottom-up approach, in which you essentially create a hybrid application. So by adding Jetpack Compose components as part of our view hierarchy, we are basically creating a hybrid application. So for this video, I have an Android view application called EasyNote that you can find on my GitHub page. You can clone it and you can play with it. You can even send pull requests with your suggested improvements. So this application is completely view based. What I'm going to do in this video is to migrate parts of this application to Jetpack Compose to show you how you can integrate Jetpack Compose technology to one of your existing Android view applications. I will start by adding Compose support to this application, and we will do that in build.gradle files. So I go to the main build.gradle file of my app. You can see that I have a section here under all projects and ext, under which I have defined several versions for different libraries that I have used in my app, like Room, coroutines, and lifecycle. I'm gonna add another version called Compose that specifies the version of Jetpack Compose that we will use, and I'm gonna specify the latest beta version of Compose that is currently available at the time of this recording. And then I'm going to move to the other build.gradle file in the app module, and I'm gonna add Compose dependencies here. So let's add them one by one. Android X dot compose dot runtime live data, and the Compose version, implementation Android X dot compose dot foundation, and foundation version of Compose, implementation Android X dot compose dot UI, and UI Compose version. The next one is UI tooling Android X dot compose UI and UI tooling, the version, implementation Android X dot compose material, and material version, implementation Android X dot compose material, and material icons core and the version, implementation, Android X dot compose, material icons, core, and the version of compose. Once we added these compose dependencies, we also need to enable compose for this application, and we do that using build features in this build.gradle file. So you can see that already we have a build feature called view binding enabled. I'm gonna enable compose here as well. Next, after we have enabled build features of compose, we go to other options that we need to configure for compose to work, like compose options. For compose options, I need to add Kotlin compiler extension version, and here I specify the version of compose that I am using for my project, and this is basically the compiler extension version that my app will use to connect to Kotlin compiler and create the compose view hierarchies. Okay, let's press sync now. Let's see if the build was successful and everything was fetched. Yes, it was successful. Now I'm gonna start with my second activity. Note that I have already two activities. The main activity that shows the list of available nodes, the nodes that have been added, and also I have another activity, edit activity, that allows me to create new nodes or messages or edit existing nodes like this. So I'm gonna start by making some changes to my edit activity and convert some of its existing view components to compose components. So in order to do that, when you want to migrate parts of your view hierarchy to compose, first you need to start with your layout file, and the layout file for that activity is the edit activity edit, and let's open some space for our work, and you can see that we have a component called message. Its ID is message, and we have another text view for name where the user enters their name as the author of the node, and we have a button take action that can display the message, update or add based on the request that is sent to it. If we are supposed to add a node, this will display add, and if we are supposed to update an existing message, this will display update. So first, let's start with the header. We also have a text view called header, and I'm gonna change this to compose, and I'm starting with this because this is the easiest and the simplest one to start with. So first of all, I copy the definition of this view, and then I comment it out because I'm going to replace it with a compose view. I delete its tag, and then I use Android X Compose UI platform and Compose view. Note that I keep its ID and I keep its constraints, its layout definitions, but I remove the components and the attributes that are not defined for Compose view, like padding. So I remove padding. Then I go to the definition of edit activity. And here, as you can see, we have a binding that inflates that layout file and initializes the view components. Here, for example, binding header, it is setting its text, and it is using requested action that is received from the intent in order to decide whether to display editing message or add a new message for the header. So I'm gonna change this because Compose view does not have a component attribute text. So I comment this out and I comment the other line as well. And now I'm going to make that change myself. In fact, I'm gonna perform it here outside of the block of code that is dealing with view hierarchies. So I say binding dot header, and this time we know that header is not text view anymore. Then I say apply because I'm going to apply my changes. And before I define my Compose UI here, I need to set a view composition strategy. Most of the time, the default view composition strategy, the strategy that Compose uses to lay out this file and to compose it, is sufficient for us. The default composition strategy is called dispose undetached from window, which is sufficient most of the time. However, it's good to know that there are other composition strategies like dispose on lifecycle destroyed and dispose on view tree lifecycle owner destroyed that you might need to use in case you are dealing with fragments or when you want to work with transitions. So in order to show you how it is used, I call set view composition strategy and then view composition strategy and the value of dispose on life cycle destroyed. Let's import view composition strategy. Dispose on lifecycle destroyed has a parameter. It needs to receive the lifecycle. I pass in the lifecycle of this application, of this activity. And once we have set the lifecycle, once we have specified the view composition strategy, we set the view that we want to create, the content of the compose structure. So I say set content. Let's create our compose content for this view. And in order to do that, we start with a text. And in fact, text is all we need for this view to work. I import text from the material library of Jetpack Compose, and to decide which text to display, editing message or add new message, I need to process requested action that I receive from the incoming intent. So I say when, or let's say if requested action equals action edit, then use string resource r dot string editing message. Otherwise, use this message, add new message, string resource r dot string dot add new message. That's it basically for how we create that view equivalent in Compose. Note that the view that we replaced with Compose view also had some padding. If you look at the definition of the view in its layout file, you can see that it has 8 dp of padding. So I need to replicate that in Compose. I do that using a modifier dot padding 8 dep, exactly that amount of padding that we had in our layout file. And that's it for this. That's it basically for this header. So let's run our application to see our changes for now. There we go, our application is running. Let's go to our edit activity to see if the change we made using our Compose view has been applied. I open an existing node, and yes, you can see that it has been added, editing message, when we are editing an existing node. And if we are supposed to create a new node, it shows add new message as the header. Nice. So we basically created a hybrid application. We added Compose view and replaced it for an existing Android view that was text view. We basically replaced it with a Compose text composable. Next, I'm gonna replace this part, this edit text that displays the message that the user is supposed to enter, or they are supposed to edit an existing message here. So I'm gonna replace that with a text field composable from Jetpack Compose. So again, as before, I start with my layout file, and the layout file is activity edit. So I go and find this edit text just like before. Let's open up some space, and I'm gonna copy the whole definition of this edit text, and then I'm going to comment out this whole edit text, and I'm gonna replace it with a Compose view. So I paste the definition of the edit text that I just copied, and I replace the tag name of edit text with Compose view. Let's type Android X, Compose UI, platform, and Compose view. Okay, you can see that it has ID of message. I keep it. It has layout width and height. I keep it because we need it to lay out our Compose view inside this view hierarchy. And we have margin start, margin end, which also are needed because they specify the outer margins, and we need them for correct layout of our Compose view. And also we have EMS that is specific to text, and we don't need it because it's not known to compose view. It's specific to edit text, so I remove it. And we have hint, we don't have it for compose view, I remove it. We have input type, we remove it. We have padding, we remove it. And then we have the constraint set and the constraint definitions for our view that are also needed, so we keep them as well. Then I go to my edit activity and I do a similar thing, something like what I did for header. I do that for message this time. So I comment out all the lines that are currently using and accessing the message that used to be an edit text, because they cannot access the text attribute anymore. I remove them, I comment them out, and I go and do something similar for that composable that I am supposed to create inside my new compose view. Alright, after binding.header, I say binding.message. Let's create the content of our compose view using Jetpack Compose. I say apply, and again I set view composition strategy, and dispose on. You can see that there are three types of lifecycle, three types of view composition strategies. And again, I'm gonna use on view tree lifecycle destroyed or on lifecycle destroyed. And lifecycle destroyed is a method that requires us, you can see that it's a class that has a constructor. It requires the lifecycle to be passed in. So I pass in the lifecycle of this activity, and next I create its content using set content. And because we usually create the content of text, edit text and their equivalents using text field, I use a text field. It's a composable from the material design library of Jetpack Compose. It has a value parameter and an onValue change. Note that these are two values that need to follow the state definition in Jetpack Compose, so that whenever the value changes inside the text field, the Compose system knows that it needs a recomposition to refresh the UI and reflect the changes to the user. So I create two variables here, input and on input change. One of them is the initial value and the other is a lambda that changes that value when the user enters a new value and updates an existing value inside the text field. So I use remember mutable state of, like this, and initially I give it an empty string, and I pass input to the value of the text field, and I also pass on input change as the value of on value change to deal with the changes and update to our text field. Also note that our edit text had some property set on our view in the layout file that we need to replicate using modifier or some other parameters that might be available to text field. So modifier, let's see what those changes and what those properties were. For our edit text, you can see that we had a hint, for example, and we had input type. We can set these changes. Hint. For the hint, let's look at the parameters. If we have hint, we don't have hint for it, but instead we will be able to use label, something specific to Jetpack Compose, material composable of text field. But for now, we are just going to use the simplest ones like padding. So I'm gonna use this, I'm gonna specify the padding, and the padding, for the padding I'm gonna use the padding value from the resources. As you can see, it was using the default padding from the daemon resources, and dimension resource r.daemon dot default padding. Let's import also dimension resource like this, and okay, for now that's fine. We might later add other properties that make it more similar to what we had in the view structure. So let's run our application for now and see how it works. Note that the text is not known here, so for now I define a temporary text variable with the value of empty string so that I can run the application. Okay, let's open an existing. Yes, you can see that our edit text has been replaced with a composable, with a text field composable. However, the text that we are sending to that activity, the text of the note that we are supposed to edit, is not displayed inside this text field, and we need to fix that. And also we cannot add a new message for now. As you can see, we are entering the message inside our text field. This is a new message added you can see that it is not working. We cannot add it for now. We need to fix them. Note that whatever text that the user enters inside our text field, we also need to pass it finally to the requesting activity in order to add it to our view model and to our list of messages. Let's do that by defining a field inside edit activity called mText. The text that the user is entering inside our text field, and I'm gonna receive it from the intent. Note that this can be late init private var private late init, and I'm gonna initialize it inside the onCreate using the received intent. So mText equals if intent get string extra message. We use this key to extract the input message from the input intent, get string extra. If it is not null, we are going to use it as the value of mText. Otherwise, we are going to use an empty string. So, in fact, we can make it simpler like this. We initially started to an empty string without deleting it, and then if it was not null, we use the received extra for the message to be edited. So mText equals it, the message that we receive from the input intent. And because we want to initially show the content of that message inside our text field, we are going to change the definition of input and uninput change state modifiers inside the set content, and we are going to initialize that state to mText instead of an empty string, like this. And finally, when we are pressing the add button or the update button, we need to use the value that has been set, and the value needs to be set as part of our composition. You can see that whenever that changes, whenever the input changes, we need to update the value of mText. So let's update that. Here on input change, on value change, I need to change the way I call this because I also have to make some other changes. I want to change the value of mText here, and I need to pass the modified text to mText, assign it to mText and update its value. Alright. Once I have kept the track of that text and the text that the user enters, and I have access to the value that has been edited or entered by the user, I can eventually pass it back as part of my intent information in set result. So for text, this time I'm gonna say put extra mText. So I don't need this temporary text definition. If text is not blank, if mText is not blank this time, and author is not blank, we are passing back the results. Okay, let's run the application to see how it works. Okay, let's enter some text. This is my first message entered inside my hybrid compose text field. Note that there are some changes, like also the tab is not working anymore in the emulator for this component, so I cannot press tab to go to the other field. Enter my name and add the message. There we go, you can see that the message was added. And then let's try its editing feature. This is my first message my first edited. I modify the text that I'm entering and I update it. Yes, you can see that the message was updated. Nice. So that's it, basically how you add a hybrid compose view to your existing Android view hierarchy, and you can follow this to perform gradual upgrade to Jetpack Compose component by component, or you can select to actually upgrade the whole screen to Jetpack Compose and design all this screen from scratch and handle everything and create their equivalents like they behaved in Android view structure and your Android view application or activity.